Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy and welcome to Retro Reviews. This is our first retro review of 2021. And oh boy, are you in for some fun tonight? We are finally starting with an Arnold Schwarzenegger film, our first Arnold Schwarzenegger film of retro reviews. And in my opinion, you probably can't do better than this one. This is, of course, the 1985 film Commando, directed by Mark L. Lester, starring the one and only, the man himself, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and some other people as well. But you're here for Arnold, and that's what we're here for as well. So, of course, this is just going to be, open discussion, talking about the film, reviewing it, favorite moments, everything like that. We'll talk about our first times watching it, but that's going to be very interesting when we get onto that. And obviously, we invite you guys to comment along too as we go through this, because this is going to be a fun one. Retro reviews, I always say every single time, it gives us the opportunity to go back to some of these older films. We've took on some big franchises, but for the next couple of weeks, we're kind of just, we're taking it easy. We're dipping into some standalone action films. They're probably all going to be action films from the 80s. And you know what? That's absolutely fine with us. And obviously, yeah, today's is Commando. So before we get into it, over to George with the socials.
Absolutely, guys. So as we always say, the best way to find out what videos we are going to be doing is by getting us on our social medias. So the best way of doing that is on Facebook at Cinema Savvy and Twitter at Cinema_Savvy. We're a lot more active on there. We're announcing more stuff. And of course, we are here to talk Arnie tonight. We are, of course, talking about Commando, but it's really him, isn't it? It's one of the Arnie films. That's the best way of putting it. So do comment along with us your memories of this film, your favorite one-liners, your favorite Arnie films, your favorite scenes, maybe even your favorite deaths, because there is some real brutal stuff in this. It is incredible. It's everything you tune in for. So comment along with us. And if you do like these videos, the fact we're going for a bit more of the 80s action stars and whatnot, we've done the Stallone films recently, we've done the Karate Kid films. If you'd like that stuff, then subscribe to the channel, because we're going to unveil next week's retro review right at the end of the episode. And for those of you a bit more modern, trying to live in the present, well, you're on the wrong video for that. However, we will be kickstarting the WandaVision reviews this Friday, the 15th of January, because Disney own our Fridays from this week onwards. Then again, if there's going to be more cinema delays, yeah, Disney is the way forward, brackets, close brackets. I don't know. But we're not here for Disney. We're here for Arnold Schwarzenegger. If you can see above us, if you're watching, then you can see his eyes. He's watching you. He's telling you to hit that subscribe button.
Absolutely. So we have a plan for this thing, but this is just going to be an open discussion. I mean, where do you start with Commando? Let's start with the plot. It's a very thin plot, as most of these 80s action films are, and that's totally fine. So Commando tells a story of a retired special forces colonel who tries to save his daughter, who was abducted by his former subordinate. That's all you need to know. Now, I don't know if this film kickstarted the whole action craze of former, once was a special agent, once was this hitman or whoever it happens to be, settle down for a life of peace with a family, usually a daughter. Doesn't always have to be. Sometimes it can be a dog. And when that gets shaken up, or someone gets kidnapped or someone gets killed, they go out for revenge. We've seen it recently with Taken. We've seen it with the John Wick films. Now, I don't know if this is the film that started it. I think it's certainly one of the films that made that popular, that formula, but it's probably a formula that's, age old before that point. My first time watching this film, Jesus, this would have been a good few years ago. I actually think this was one that I caught on TV one time. I mean, I've always been a big Schwarzenegger fan. It's always that debate, isn't it? It's who do you prefer most? Is it Schwarzenegger or Stallone? Now, as a kid, it would be Schwarzenegger, hands down. He had the most fun films. He had the one-liners. Not to say that Stallone didn't as well, but Schwarzenegger kind of made those popular. The Terminator films were like a cut above the rest for me, so it was always, Schwarzenegger was the face of the action films for me. And then as I've got older, it kind of shifted more in Stallone's favor, I think. And I think definitely from an acting standpoint, if we're going to bring it down to that, Stallone's the best. But this film was just, it's everything you need. And, I'm going to bring up the poster right now. It's going to come up on an overlay right now. I just put it up there. Look at that poster. That's not even the full poster. Like that. This is easily probably one of my favorite posters. It does everything. This film does everything it needs to. It knows exactly what it is. It's written as such. It's acted as such. It's got all the ingredients of everything you expect from a film. This, to me, is probably the quintessential 80s action film. If it ain't number one, it's certainly in the top three for me. So I watched this a good bunch of years ago, had a blast with it. You know what you're getting in for, and it delivers on every single aspect that it does. I will say, though, that for this retro review, though, this was the first time I ever watched the director's cut. Now, I didn't know how much stuff was added to the director's cut. I didn't even know there was removed footage until a few years ago. I think it was like 2015 or 17. The Blu-ray came out, which was the never before seen director's cut, the uncut version. and it's a whole 1 minute and 40 seconds longer. So, you know, if you can't get your hands on it, don't worry about it. It's just some extra killing, really, some alternate takes. But nevertheless, it was fun to see some of those takes and some extra scenes that I hadn't seen before. So that's kind of my first time watching experience with it.
My first time watching this is really sad and depressing because it was today.
That shocked me when you told me. I thought you'd seen this before.
Arnie is one that when I was that age, and I don't know what age it was. Let's say year 7. Let's say I was 11. Film 4, E4, whatever you want to do. Oh, there's this like 18 rated film. So I remember all that stuff with Terminator, and I think it's that Stallone Schwarzenegger debate that when I was a kid, you know, I Jingle All the Way. That's great. Yeah. That was one of my favorite Christmas films. It still is. But you suddenly start watching these 80s classics, and I'm not saying they're all the same. But I remember watching the Predators, all the Terminators, and you were going through them like section by section. And I loved Arnie. I had his autobiography and everything, and I absolutely adore him. And then I just never got around to watching Commando. It was one of them films that's sitting there behind me on that shelf. It was unwatched for years. Bought it, didn't ever get to see it. There were so many of them. You know, I think I was trying to juggle all those 80s heroes, especially around the time the Expendables was like, I need to see more of everyone from this. So I never got to see it. And I'm going to tell you about an event that didn't happen thanks to lockdown. Last year, I planned for me and one of my school friends, we were going to be going down to London for the night. You're very familiar with the Prince Charles Cinema. We had tickets to the Arnie All-Nighter at the Prince Charles. This was going to be a marathon that started at 9 at night, finished at 9 in the morning, and it was going to be showing Commando, Predator, Running Man, Total Recall, and the 2 Terminator films. Now, I have not seen all of them. It was going to be one of the greatest nights. We had booze. Well, we didn't have, but you have to buy booze in there. But we had everything prepped out. Yeah, exactly. And we're really looking forward to it because it's one of the, you know, when you've the people, when you were friends at that age, it's like we used to watch these at home when we were kids and stuff. And it's like, it's going to be really good fun. So obviously many things have been cancelled over last year, but this is still the one that stung the most because it was so close to it happening. I think it was April or March it was due for, and it didn't go ahead. And, you know, if they do put it on when they get a chance, hopefully at the end of this year, if they can do anything, I will go to this because watching this today, you know, I've seen clips on YouTube, but I wasn't completely alien to. I knew the premise, I knew some of the one-liners, I'd seen some of the clips, but I think with these 80s films, it's about watching them fluently is probably a best term, like watching second one through to the credits and whatnot. And it was something I hadn't done for this, and I was really looking forward to it. So it was a shame that it was done at home and not when I had something planned, but hopefully for the future I get that chance again. But very boring first story, but because it's sort of one of the first, like we've spoke about Schwarzenegger on the channel before, but not, I wouldn't say drastically. I think the Terminator reviews from many years ago we would have spoke, but doing these retro reviews, we keep saying it between us, it opens up so many doors, and you think of those 80s action heroes. You know, it was great talking about the Rocky films for weeks, the Karate Kid films for weeks, but it's that film for 10 p.m. late night film. What's on Commando? It's one of those, and it was still magnificent. I must say that too. Just with my initial thoughts going in, it's such good fun. The one-liners still land, the action still lands, and not to criticize modern films, but 80s action films have a very, very specific look and feel.
Yeah,
and it does make things like, like we're never going to get this again. And they always have that effect. The closest we have is John Wick, or as an individual, The Rock, but they don't compare to the Stallones, to the.
No one ever will.
No, yeah. They're like they're the what's that monument in America with the 4 presidents?
Oh, Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, like if there's a Mount Rushmore of action heroes, there's you can just put them each on twice actually.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And that look and feel is exactly what I'm gravitated towards with these. Came close to it with Expendables 2. Not quite, but yeah. I think definitely out of the Expendables films, the second one was the one where I was like, that's almost there. That's doing exactly what I need it to. And it's just a lot of these 80s films. I can't remember which one we were talking about, actually, in one of our retro reviews, where I talked about you see these actors in these films, and the more of these we do, and if we stick with, I mean, I don't want to just keep it. I mean, I'd love to keep it just to the 80s, but, you know, retro reviews can mean any decade. But the more of these we watch, I'm sure we'll see more and more of these actors crop up, and we'll see familiar faces crop up. And that's what I love about these films. Even this one as well, like the cast, you've got David Patrick Kelly, who's the guy who he dangles over the cliff. For me, in The Wanderers, in The Crow. Is one of the main bad guys in The Crow, and it did just these great character actors that show up. Bill Paxton, one of my favorite actors of all time, shows up for a scene in this film. He is bottom credited right here on Wikipedia as Intercept Officer. You've got Bill Duke from Predator. Like Predator and this are like the big two. The most elusive person to ever get a hold of at a Comic-Con, I will say. I think 2 or 3 appearances he's meant to have scheduled and pulled out of last minute. One day I hope to meet Bill Duke, but yeah, and that's why I love these films. Even Bennett, Vernon Wells, like crops up in Mad Max 2. And it's just these little films. They might not do loads of stuff. They might have like a big list of credits, but there's only like 2 or 3 things you really remember them from. But it's all that kind of feel to it. I love it. And obviously, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, I don't know how many films he'd done before this point. I mean, it was middle of the 80s. I think he was well into his career at this point, and he was that household name. Like you see that poster, it's just Schwarzenegger, Commando, him front and center, and that's all you need, and that's exactly what you get from it. And you're right about the action, just everything. And actually, I think that this film, it does have a lot of action, but it really genuinely does save the best till last, doesn't it? That whole, so many action films come out where they'll take the ending of this film and that will be every single scene throughout the film. But this one, you have a couple of car chases here and there, you have a couple of fist fights, but when you get to that ending, it's just, they just blow their load at the end of this film pretty much, and you just get everything. And obviously in the director's cut, you get even more of it as well. It's brilliant. It's the blood bags. It's just that 80s. It's just everything. It's the explosions left, right, and center. It's fantastic. The director as well, Mark L. Lester. I haven't really seen. I don't think I've seen anything else he's done, but he's gone on record saying that this is his favorite film that he's ever made, and quite rightly so. I mean, the film speaks for itself, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that's what's nice with this is someone that was sort of alien to it, the basic premise, but I didn't know how it was going to go down. So as someone like alien to it, I was like, okay, daughter tick, okay, we need a subplot. But it's when these villains, we kind of said the Rocky ones, they're like the cartoon characters, and there's nothing wrong in that. You're there for it. You want that over-the-top exaggeration, those outrageous one-liners, the stupid one-liners, the funny ones. If these films are stupid, if they don't, they always end up working anyway, because it's just got that right balance of I can put all this behind me because I'm literally watching Arnold Schwarzenegger carrying a tree. I mean, people were losing their shit when Captain America ripped that log in half. Was it a real log? I don't know. I'm pretty sure that's a real tree that Arnold Schwarzenegger was probably
probably.
But it's one of those where you know what you're coming in for, and it's hard that if you don't like that kind of thing, you're not going to even bother looking, because as you pointed out earlier, that poster, that's probably one of the best posters he's ever been in anything. I mean, the Predator one's obviously a classic one. There's loads of classic Arnie posters, but I think Commando is that one when you sort of the 13-year-old kid getting into these 80s films, you see that photo of him and you realize, okay, I know exactly what I'm going to be watching and what on earth is going to happen in it. But it's going to it as well. It's the build-up that you're going to have these, you're going to have the fights, you're going to have the guns, you're going to have the physical, everything, but you always know with these, you are going to get an insane, over-the-top final act. And they always have it's the build-up, it's that sort of, not even a montage of him getting ready, but when he starts putting the paint on and everything like that. Yeah, it's just hard not to realize, like, this is just going to be fun. And that's the thing with these, like, can you sit down a real film critic and can they watch it? Yes, of course they can, but if they're going in to analyze it from that perspective, they've got it completely wrong. This is the ultimate. We always say that Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, sitting down with the beers, watching Bounty Door. This is that kind of thing. It is those 80s ones, and I think that's why it resonates in pop culture, because it's such like, I hate the term, like not like a lads thing, but I'd say the same. When you're younger, you'd go to certain mates and have the same social group for specific films. Like, we used to have like a Thursday night one. I was like 13 and the others were in their 30s. There's a lot of beers and stuff. And every Thursday for a year, it was like these classic action films. We've seen so many due to that. And it's just magnificent.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of, you were talking about sort of like modern day equivalents, and I don't even want to say like the Fast and Furious films, but something that kind of gives you that kind of that sort of like muscle bound hero, getting the girl, explosions, full blown action film. I'm trying to think of that. It's something that's very of the 80s, I think. That was a very popular genre, popular formula for films, and I don't want to say like modern sensibilities and everything. We seem to be getting away from that, or it's kind of being critiqued. It's every kind of essay that you do at school in media, right? Or like film studies. It's the male gaze, it's crisis of masculinity, like all this thing that you do. But it's just bloody good fun. And I had a goddamn blast rewatching this film yesterday. And that's the thing, like, on the channel we have like scheduled things that we know that we're going to review, whether it be a Disney Plus series or something that you're going to be locked into for a while. And you get all these Oscar films, and we love those as well. But sometimes you just got to sit down and watch a film like Commando. You know what I mean? Just like 80 to 90. Yeah, exactly. It's such an easy watch, and that's why these retro reviews are great, and why I love doing them. It's because we can just chill and kick back and watch a film that. And it is kind of new as well, because Commando, like, it's a film I've seen a bunch of times, maybe 2 or 3 times. I don't know it inside out, so it's always, and we watch so many films as well that it's always good to sort of remind yourself of a film too. So it's good that we got this one ticked off as well. Hopefully more Arnold Schwarzenegger films in the future. As I said, we don't want to inundate you with 80s action films all the time, but we do kind of have carte blanche with it. It's just like, we both decide on what we want to watch. You might pick one, I might pick one. We just go for it. We've talked about the action because there is so much in this film, but I think we need to talk. I mean, favorite moments and one-liners. Christ, when you start, it's like the entire film, like everything is one-liner.
Every moment with Arnie is essentially classic. From him ripping, you're trying to think chronologically as well. Not even ripping the seat out, because even before that, you've probably got the bin. So the bin men got me because it's such a GTA thing. Like, okay, something's going to happen, all these opening scenes, or the car, stealing the car. I think that's a great one line. It's like, I love the price. It's like, what? And you know what's going to happen. And it is that 80s one-liners. They're all classics, but to pick some of the best ones, it's really boring. Obviously, the Bennett one is the classic, I guess. Yeah. Maybe the most famous quote from the film. Is it my favorite, though? No, I think it's the airplane one. I think it's probably the same as yours.
Oh, the dead tired one.
Yeah, it's just the way, like, he's like, you speak again, I'll nail your jaw. It's like, oh, okay, like, it's like, oh, is he gonna jump off the plane? Is he gonna fight him on the plane? And it's like, no, like Super Saiyan Arnold Schwarzenegger, like elbow to the head. And it's like, oh, okay, he's knocked out, and then just like snaps the neck. I was like, sorted. And then it's the whole like blanket and pillow that just it just adds to it, rather than be this over. As much as we love John Wick, and you mentioned that actually really quickly. Sorry to backtrack. The sort of the modern day cinema stuff. I think nowadays with films like The Raid, where we've had John Wick, action's looked upon differently, where I think people have sort of put the 80s stuff behind them. They love them for it. But I think there's this common acceptance that it won't come back. Yeah. And I just mean in terms of filmmaking, if you shot this on like modern day technology, digital cameras, 4K, and you had those action set pieces, it would look weird. And it's kind of why it's, well, obviously we're going to get to Bond maybe in a month, maybe in 6 months. We don't know right now. It's that evolution of the action film across modern era and modern audiences. And I think the only close thing we have to it is John Wick. And John Wick works because it is that one-man warpath, but it's done stylistically and from a technical standpoint, not from a physical one, as silly as that sounds. And I think there is that modern day, things have changed and actions changed with it, but you can't beat these. Again, the Rock. Love The Rock, me more than most. Grew up with wrestling, loved a lot of his action films, but not that it's boring that he plays The Rock in every film, because we love that of Arnie with Stallone and all this. What are his classic action films?
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't think you've got the audience to go to them to make it a classic. Fast and Furious, you kind of mentioned, it's so different, but that's probably The Rock.
Like, I'm trying. Scorpion King is the only one I can think of, maybe. And then
exactly, and like you think of Fast and Furious, and it's like it's famous, not for necessarily they're so outrageous and over the top. That's why people love them, but that's not why we love these 80s films. There's such a big divide, but it's the most comparison thing to it. I don't know. That's me waffling. Sorry.
Yeah, no, and you talked about like the whole digital thing as well, and nowadays it's just easier to film films on digital than it is on actual film reel. But I do think you lose a lot. I can't even describe. It's just with older films like 80s, even some 90s ones, but especially 80s, it's like the sound quality, the sound of the punches, the explosion, just like the blood bags, as I mentioned, like the squibs and everything. It's like a whole feel to it. There's the moment where in this where Arnie gets out of the plane and he's on like the landing gear and then he jumps off, and it's clearly a dummy that's just free falling, and then he just gets up. But I love all that stuff. I love sort of like seeing like, oh, that's that's a dummy that's been dropped off a cliff. And you can see it's obviously is that, you know, you might see it on the big screen if we ever get to see it on the big screen, if they do another one of those marathons, and you'll see some of the kind of crappy ADR in the film, but I kind of like it because I know that I don't actually think the budget was that high for this. This was like 9 million. It made 60 million. I think it was one of the highest grossing films of that year. It was shot in like 45 days. Like, this is a very, I won't say it's a simple film because no film's simple. There's a lot of there's many explosions in this and, you know, stuntmen and everything like that, choreographed action, but it feels very small scale. And I think action films are probably better when they don't try and do too much, when they do keep it as simple as possible. And with the modern examples of The Raid and John Wick, which, in my opinion, if we're talking modern cinema, are probably the two pillars of great sort of like modern action film, I'd say that's probably more martial arts. It's that weird territory, isn't it? You're like, yes, it is action and it does have some action scenes, you know, it has its fair share of car chases and things like that, but it is almost balletic in the way that the action happens and the hand-to-hand fighting. So I think it's like differentiation between martial arts style film versus all-out explosive action like this.
Yeah, and I think as well, off the side of that, stakes are a really big thing, because how many modern day films is we must save the world, or the world's going to get destroyed and we're going to be the one to save it. There is a time and place that absolutely, but sometimes less is more. And when it's something as personal as I just want to save my daughter, and it is that 80s trope, but when films are trying to do too much too quickly, so much of the time, when you get something that's not as drawn out, it is that John Wick. They killed my dog, I'm going to kill them. It's as simple as it can be, but you know that's why you're going to enjoy it, because it's not trying to do too much. You're there for an action film, so you don't need narrative structures to go with it. Hypocritical coming from a Christopher Nolan fan. So he's his own spy film, but there is a time and place for things like that. I think sometimes you just want to, as you said, just chill out, let it all out, and just have a bit of fun. I think that's what the big things of all of these are. And I think in that 80s era, it was certainly that when the one-man armies came in, I'm not saying Bond had anything to do with it, but the Bond films were suddenly trying to be those 80s films. And this came out the same mood as A View to a Kill, to put it lightly, in terms of a one-man 20, 30 years too old doing those kind of set pieces. It's all about the individuals, but it's fascinating. There's like a really good essay in there somewhere that we could probably do.
Yeah, if we had the time. Well, we have the time, but I don't know if we're cut out for the essay kind of thing. I've done my fair share of essays in my life. I don't know if I want to go back to that just yet. Favorite moments. The opening scene is hilarious to me. It's showing this perfect idyllic life with Arnold Schwarzenegger and his daughter. And it's like they're eating ice cream together, and the music's really. We'll get onto the music in a minute. James Horner is one of my favorite composers, but they're eating ice cream together. You know, like they're frolicking the pool. They're like feeding a deer. It's the most over the top cliche. We're living the perfect life kind of scenario. It just always cracks me up every single time I see it. So that's one of the moments that always gets me. Oh my god! Then Jesus, other favorite, the bit where he drops what's his name? Oh my god, David Patrick Kelly's character off the cliff. That's easily one of my favorites. Remember when I said I would kill you last? I lied. And then the sound, just easily one of my favorite bits. Oh my god. Yep, let off some steam.
Like the whole film.
Yeah, it is the whole film. And the one-liners we talked about, there's so many that have cropped up beforehand in like Terminator. Like off the top of my head, there's the "fuck you, asshole." That's from the original Terminator film. Oh my god, help me out here. There's
I'll be back.
I'll be back. Oh, I think there's the right, wrong. That's another one. I think that's in T1 as well. So there's all these ones that crop up.
There's an Hasta La Vista, but that's Terminator 2, isn't it?
Yeah, no, there's something like that, isn't there? Like Hasta La Huevos or something. And I really T2 as well. Actually, the mall. Speaking of T2, the mall, like the shopping mall from this, is the same one as the Galleria from T2. And it's weird, like you read up about the film and there's all, whether it's like a producer here or a writer here or something, they're all kind of connected in this weird sort of like dot to dot way of all like the films that you know from that decade, or the 90s were like T2. And like speaking of that connection, like I found this out. The screenplay was written by Stephen E. De Souza. I think that's how you pronounce his name. He's done a bunch of stuff. He's written The Running Man again, like another Arnie film. Before this film, he did 48 Hours with Nick Nolte, Eddie Murphy, and I think he was the co-writer on the first two Die Hard films as well. And there's a place name, and it's mentioned in this. It's called Valverde. And anything that Steven de Souza would write, when he needed sort of like a generic name for like a Mexican city or province or something like that, he'd always use the name Valverde. And that crops up in a bunch of these films. Like I think it's mentioned in Predator, it's mentioned in Die Hard, it's mentioned in this. So there's a weird sort of like almost Valverde cinematic universe going on between all these action films. I don't know if anyone's sort of there's probably like people that have like analyzed that and everything, but it's kind of a cool little Easter egg that the writer always throws in there. I'm trying to think of any more favorite moments, to be honest, from this. It's literally the whole movie. It's perfect. There was one line which got cut out apparently, and I was reading about this. This ties in with the director's cut. So the director's cut, they had a scene in. It's a bit more gore. I mean, I don't know if it's a particularly gory film before this point, but he goes into like a sort of tool shed and he gets these sort of like razor disc blades and he's like throwing them into people's heads. He cuts a guy's arm off. It does look pretty graphic. It's pretty awesome.
It lingers on him as well. The version I saw that they don't just chop his arm off. Like he leaves the scene, Arnold, and then it cuts back to him just like on the floor, like making noises with like one arm. Yeah.
It was a really cool prosthetic as well. Like fair play to them for that. It looked really cool. But apparently from a wide shot, you can see Arnie just sort of like pick up the arm and just like casually chuck it back at the guy after he's cut it off. Originally, it was going to be much darker than that, and they cut it out apparently because it was too macabre. He was going to pick up the severed arm that he just cut off the guy, smack the guy with it, and say like, "Need a hand?" And I was like, no, come on, that was perfect. Just throw it in there. That would have been amazing. So God knows what other cut footage was out of this film as well, or what was initially intended. I think one thing that was cut out actually was a love scene between Arnold and the main female lead in it, played by Ray Dawn Chong. They don't really go down a love route. There's almost like a thing at the end when, you know, he gets his daughter back and then he kind of gets on the plane with her. It's like, I don't know, are they sort of like a new family together now or something? Is she sort of like, he's got the girl, he's got his daughter back, fly into the sunset kind of thing. Not too keen on her character of Cindy. I do find her a little bit annoying. But again, it's sort of like one of those almost like necessary ingredients in a film such as this, really.
Yeah, it's one of those where it kind of pops up and it's like, oh, okay, I forgot they're going to go that sort of 80s love angle, but I'm glad they don't. And does she even, I think she calls the codes and calls in, and do we really see her again? I can't actually remember. But I'm glad they went against it.
Seen, not heard, isn't she, as a character? Yeah.
It's one of them where she's a plot device to get from, you know, I need your Porsche. Follow this guy. There's some great scenes with her. I like the angle, like, oh, there's this crazy psycho dude that's trying to get me. He's the 6 foot guy out there. I loved her in it, but I'm glad that they didn't over rely on her. And she has obviously the scene of the rocket launch going the wrong way, which is quite funny and stuff. But I think there's a place for it, but I'm glad we don't get too much of it, because the biggest criticism of those 80s films is the really forced, uncomfortable, like romance plots that happen in the space of like 2 minutes per action film. So I'm glad they just kind of left this one and just moved on with it.
Yeah, again, it's just another one of those box ticks, isn't it, really? But yeah, I don't really care for her character all that much. A character that I do care for, and I think is absolutely brilliant in this film, is Bennett. I do want to talk about Bennett a bit. He's such a great bad guy in this. And again, it's like maybe an actor that I haven't seen in all that much, but the film that they're in, within this one film, he has so much like charisma, personality, and you remember the character. So exactly the same reason when we talked about Karate Kid Part 3 with a character like Silver. So over the top, so comedic, so cartoony. And just the look of him and everything, just he's in this sort of like weird leather chainmail vest suit thing, like we talked about. He's so homoerotic in this film. I think even the actor himself described himself as Freddie Mercury on steroids. He's just great. He's just so much fun. And it builds and it builds, and when you get to that final boss fight with him at the end in the random boiler room, like there's always a boiler room in these kind of films with like all steam coming out of pipes and everything. I don't know where it's like they almost like land in a completely different environment just for the final fight. I'm totally okay with it. And he's just like, he's off his tits, isn't he? In the ending, he's just screaming. He's just so over the top. It's a brilliant final fight. And again, why I love these films is, you know, they build up this bad guy, such a great, memorable, either visually memorable or the way they play it. With the material they have as well, like they make the character their own, and they always deliver on the final boss fight, and they always get them in like the most over the top way. And I mean, we mentioned it already, but let off some steam. Bennett just impales him with that tube and then the smoke coming out. I think doesn't the guy like sort of like dies with like holding the pipe. His arms don't even kind of go limp. He's just sort of like holding this pipe in place. You clearly tell he was just like probably had a pipe with the prop with the smoke coming out, just stuck it against his chest and rolled the camera.
It's that traditional how these over the top films need an over the top villain death. And it's the steam it's coming out. It's the way he acts around it as well. He gives the quote about, "I won't shoot you between the eyes, I'll shoot you between the balls," even though he knows he's about to die as well, which makes it even kind of funnier. But yeah, it's just perfect. And I think that's when you go back to these Arnie films. You know, there is the Arnie versus Stallone debate. I think Arnie's always had the best one-liners. I think no one's going to come close. It's a combination, not just the words, but it's the accent as well. Come on, it's always going to be that. Epitomized in Batman and Robin. But it's just perfect delivery, and it deserves a one-liner. And you always go back to films like Hot Fuzz, where the whole point is like, no, you need a one-liner when you do something, and it has to be Arnie, and there isn't a better one. I wonder if they designed some of the scenes around the one-liners they want to say. That's what I've always wondered. Probably. Because it seems someone's come with, okay, that's a really cool line. How are we going to kill him and let him off some steam? And I feel that there's conversations. Same way, like one director was, here's this delicate quote I read in a book when I was 8. Let's make a 10-hour film around it. Whereas these guys are like, how do we kill someone grotesquely and have an amazing one-liner come straight after? And that's exactly what you want from these.
And I want to know where that period was in sort of like Arnie's career, because he started out, he did stuff like there was Pumping Iron, he did like the Hercules in New York films and everything. I think Conan was his big breakout one, and then straight after that, following it up with Terminator. Now I know he pushed for the line "I'll be back" in the first Terminator film. Now there are plenty of other one-liners in that film. He doesn't talk all that much though in the first one, so I don't know if like just the one-liner thing just suddenly became popular, probably to do with his accent as well and the way he was playing it. And then subsequently every other film that he was in, that became the formula, and the writers were like, right, we've got to get some one-liners in there for Arnie to say. Like, I don't know which film sort of instigated that and which ones continued to make that popular, whether it was a conscious decision. I don't know whether Arnie would come up with some of those himself, as I mentioned, like the "I'll be back" thing, or if there's like an initial line written. I think it was in the script, but it wasn't written as like "I'll be back." I think it was written like "I'll be back soon," or just something like that. It was like worded slightly differently, but he pushed to say it how he needed to. So I don't know. It's interesting, but it works. Like they nailed it. Like all of these films with those one-liners, but this definitely sort of, I think minute for minute in terms of one-liners of like Arnie films, I think this one has it all really in terms of that stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons you are looking for all of these. It's not just the one-liners; it's how they act, it's how they react around it. Even to the point of looking at these sort of icons. I don't know if anyone, not to get political. Schwarzenegger released a 7-minute video this week. He gets out his Conan the Barbarian sword like 6 minutes into the video. he's sat in like his office. It looks like some kind of chamber, and he's giving like a legitimate speech. I think the words. Sorry, I'm reading it right here. The more you pound it with a hammer and then heat it in the fire and thrust it into the cold water and pound it again, and that's just turning it into politics. And he's just it's what you want. And I can imagine him at home writing like these modern day, obviously we're a bit younger when he was in politics. Like I can't tell you his politics speeches. I think they called him the Governator, or Bush did, which sums up Bush. But it's Arnie, and it's going back again to that poster, to the look, to everything you want from this. And if you're going to watch this film, you know what you're going to get before you press play, before you load it, before you go on a poster, before you press play on Netflix or whatever. There's no way you can enter an Arnie film like this without having any of that planned. And I think if you're in for that, you're going to have a hell of a ride to kind of deteriorate and move onwards. But it's just so perfectly epitomized.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm trying to think of anything else to talk about. There's the music I want to touch on really quickly. So like James Horner, the score. It's such a strange score. It feels like almost weirdly out of place. So James Horner, one of my favorite composers, done the famously Titanic, Braveheart. He's done Aliens, Star Trek 2, Wrath of Khan. So many more to mention. A lot of sort of like the 90s kids films as well, like the animated stuff he dabbled with as well. And it was a really big shocker to me to know that he did the soundtrack to this film, because for the most part it's so unlike anything he's ever done before. It's quite low-key, so there's like a nice sort of like instrumental opening which like opens the film, which is very much like a James Horner sound, but then like just steel pans just take over the entire soundtrack, and it's almost like
I thought this.
Yeah, it's like the soundtrack just repeated. It's like the same bite of like just repeated almost throughout. There's like a bits of saxophone thrown in there, and I think I read as well that I think a film that he did before this was 48 Hours, which was the Nick Nolte, Eddie Murphy film that I mentioned. I think he did the music to that, and he's reused almost entirely, I think, like cues from that film into this one. So it's sort of like a soundtrack that's all over the place, really. So you've got like a little bit of orchestral stuff, and then it goes into like there's some synth in there as well, but it's those steel pans. It's like feeling like, oh, we're in the Caribbean now or something. What's all this about? Like,
it reminds me of like Dr. No and those like early 60s Bond films. Like, this is a really random instrument to be playing. Like, it's completely appropriate, but it's so strange. And as I said, I just listened. I was like, is this a steel pan? And then they just don't stop. It's like, it's a steel pan. But yeah, the music, I didn't notice it too much, I won't lie. But I think, again, going back to it, it's that you're not in it for the music. The music's an addition to these kind of films, but you know what you're concentrating for, and that's the action, the sound, and the rest of it. And the music's just a bonus that can match the scenes.
I will say, like, the end credits song, though, like the final song that plays into the credits, We Fight for Love, by probably the best like 80s name for a band ever, Power Station. Like, can you get more 80s than that? I love that song. Again, just like throw it into the playlist of like 80s action film soundtracks. Absolutely love it. And the film that we'll be covering next, we're not going to give it away just yet at the very end of this, but the film that we're covering next has a fantastic soundtrack with plenty of those songs in it too. Overall thoughts for me, if you haven't seen this film, please watch it. If you are an Arnie fan, chances are you've probably seen it. If you haven't, definitely check it out. It's everything it needs to be. Don't go in expecting something crazy, complex, thought-provoking or anything like that. It ain't any of that. And you know what? That's fine. There's a place for these kind of films as well. And this was exactly what the doctor ordered yesterday when I was watching this film. 80 to 90 minutes. If you can get a hold of the director's cut version, sure. If you can't, no worries. It's only like a minute extra. It's got one-liners. It's got all of the Arnold Schwarzeneggerisms that you can, that you've come to imagine at this point. The action's fantastic and just full of cartoony, brilliant, well-acted characters that are memorable. This is easily one of my favorites. It's one that you can sort of like throw on whenever. You don't really have to pay much attention to it because you're there for the explosions, and when it gets to that point, it really delivers. So absolutely 100% recommend Commando. One of my favorites from the 80s.
Definitely. If you want to chill out with a beer one evening just to watch a film, have some fun, Commando is one of those films on the list. You know what you're going in for. You're going to have a good time. You're going to get the one-liners. You're going to get the action. You're going to get fist pumps and all of it. So I thoroughly recommend this film. It's so enjoyable. As someone that was first time to it, it's everything I expected and more. It wasn't too obvious, as in some of the action was different. I think you can differentiate some of Arnie's action films compared to the others, and this one is that perfect. Again, going back to that poster, the look, the reputation, this does justice to all of those. It's not overhyped in the absolute faintest. It's just such good fun, and it's great action to get, and it's stuff you just don't get to see anymore, which is another big key part for it.
Definitely. And I mean, there are so many Arnie films. I mean, there's so many films in general and retro reviews. We do have carte blanche. We can literally go to any decade, any film. But there's definitely fertile ground there, I think, for some more Arnie films. Maybe we'll take on Running Man at some point. But we want to hear what your favorite Arnie films are. And going back to Commando as well, what are some of your favorite one-liners from this, favorite moments, any memories, anything you want to share on this film, please do let us know. And of course, we're always open to recommendations for retro reviews. If you want to see us cover a film, if there's a film that's particularly near and dear to your heart, please throw it out to us. You can do that either in the comments section for this or on our social media as well. That's Facebook at Cinema Savvy, Twitter at Cinema_Savvy. So you can always drop us a message on there or tweet us or whatever you want to do and recommend anything to us. If you'd like to pick up some of our merch as well, we do have a TeePublic link in the description down below. Feel free to check that out. We have a couple of t-shirt designs on there for you to check out. And so that will do it for our Commando review. Now we're going to sort of like give you a little hint as to what's coming up next. So this week, Friday, Disney is going to be our way of life every Friday for probably the rest of the year, really, isn't it? Let's be honest. So we'll be kicking off with our WandaVision review. Now, as of right now, I think it's rumored that 2 episodes are coming out on Friday on Disney Plus. Whether that's the case or not, we'll wait and see. It could be a 1-episode review. It could be the first 2 episodes review. The point is, we'll be back on Friday, 15th of January at 8 p.m. to review that. Really not sure what to make of that so far. I think it could be very interesting. And I mean, Marvel's not letting up anytime soon, is it? So we'll be jumping into that. And George, I'm going to let you announce what we're going to be doing for our next retro review.
Yeah, so sticking with the 80s action heroes, they've had a very last-minute change. There are many of heroes, let alone their films. It's like a Hydra. Pick an action star, then like 3 films are going to crop off in this place. We're going to be reviewing Cobra next Tuesday, which I'm very excited for. We've had a lot of Stallone fun. We adore doing the Rocky films. And we're going to go to his because this is a film I have not seen. I don't know if I own it. That is the other thing. I need to check the shelf behind me. That is a sign that you have far too many films for your own good. But I am very excited because I have not seen this. I'm looking forward to this. It's something that I want to tick off the list. So a brand new retro review coming next Tuesday. I love saying new retro review because there's still old films, but it just gives us a chance to mix up the stuff we have to watch, the Oscar films, with some fun ones in the meantime. So if you have enjoyed this review, if you have enjoyed our other retro reviews previously, then you know our thoughts on Stone and Arnie, but do come back for Cobra next week. That's going to be good fun.
Absolutely. It's a film that I've wanted to talk about on the channel for ages. Very last minute as well to the schedule. Right before this, I can announce we were going to do Roadhouse, the Patrick Swayze classic. Great film. Maybe we'll come back to it at some point, but I'm not quite done talking about Stallone yet. I want to dip my toes back into the Stallone film. So tune in next Tuesday for that, once again at 8 p.m. This has been a blast. We just had a message from Carl. Great review, guys. Thanks for tuning in, as always, man. And that'll do it for us. And we'll see you guys on Friday for WandaVision. Take care, everyone.